college campuses. They're supposed to be about learning, growing, and figuring out how to sneak beer past your RA. But throughout history, they've also been hotbeds of activism, places where young people find their voice and use it to challenge the status quo. And let me tell you folks, 2025 is no different. From coast to coast, campuses are erupting in protests, with students demanding change and refusing to back down. It's messy, it's loud, and it's making a lot of people uncomfortable, but you know what? That's kind of the point. These kids today, they're inheriting a world on fire with climate change, economic inequality, and endless conflicts. And frankly, they're pissed off. They see injustice and they're not afraid to call it out. Whether it's about racial profiling, LGBTQ+ rights, or, as we've seen recently, the escalating conflict between Israel and Palestine. This isn't just about textbooks and lectures anymore. This is about the future these students are going to inherit, and they're not going to do it quietly. The Israel-Gaza conflict, a wound that never seems to heal, has ripped open old scars and ignited a firestorm on campuses across the country. Students, many of them with personal connections to the region, are demanding their universities take a stand. They're calling for divestment from Israeli companies, accusing them of profiting from the occupation. They're organizing rallies, marches, and sit-ins, their voices echoing across quads and through campus streets. And it's not just about Israel-Palestine. This conflict has become a lightning rod, igniting broader conversations about human rights, social justice, and the role of universities in global politics. It's forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the price of silence. The stakes are high, the emotions are raw, and the consequences are real. This isn't a game. This is about real lives, real futures, and the kind of world we want to live in. Now, if all this sounds familiar, it should, because 2025 is starting to look a lot like the 1960s, a time when college campuses became the epicenter of social and political upheaval. Back then, it was the Vietnam War that ignited the firestorm. Students, horrified by the carnage and outraged by the draft, rose up to challenge the government and demand an end to the bloodshed. From the free speech movement at Berkeley to the Columbia University protests, students took to the streets, risking arrest, expulsion, and even violence to make their voices heard. They challenged authority, questioned the status quo, and demanded a better world. And you know what? They won. The Vietnam War ended. The Civil Rights Act was passed. The voting age was lowered to 18. These weren't just victories for students, they were victories for democracy, for justice, and for the idea that ordinary people can make a difference. So, yeah, 2025 might feel like a time of chaos and division, but it's also a time of hope, a time when young people are reclaiming their power and demanding a seat at the table. But here's the thing about power, it doesn't like to be challenged. And whether it's the 1960s or 2025, the powers that be have a nasty habit of trying to silence dissent. Back in the 60s, it was the National Guard opening fire on unarmed student protesters at Kent State, a tragedy that shocked the nation and became a symbol of state-sanctioned violence against its own citizens. Today, it's less about bullets and bayonets, and more about legal maneuvering and media manipulation. Universities, facing pressure from donors and politicians, are cracking down on protests, imposing restrictions on free speech, and even calling in the police to break up demonstrations. Politicians, eager to score points with their base, are demonizing student activists, accusing them of being unpatriotic, anti-Semitic, or worse. They're threatening to cut funding to universities that don't toe the line, using the power of the purse to stifle dissent. Section 5, the media's megaphone. And then, there's the media, the self-proclaimed guardians of truth and objectivity. In the 60s, it was television news with its grainy footage and authoritative anchors that shaped the narrative. And let's just say they weren't exactly sympathetic to the student movement. Protesters were often portrayed as radical hippies, unwashed and un-American, more interested in smoking pot and burning flags than engaging in meaningful dialogue. Fast forward to 2025 and the media landscape has changed, but the playbook remains the same. Cable news, with its 24/7 outrage cycle, thrives on conflict and division. Social media, with its echo chambers and algorithms, amplifies extreme voices and fuels polarization. The result? A public discourse that's more about shouting matches and hashtag wars than nuanced debate and critical thinking. It's a toxic environment that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to have a productive conversation about complex issues. Section 6, the price of dissent. So, what's the takeaway here? Well, for starters, protesting is hard. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, and it comes with a price. Students today are facing arrest, expulsion, and even violence for daring to speak truth to power. They're being harassed online, threatened by right-wing groups, and doxxed by internet trolls. But they're also facing something more insidious, the chilling effect of self-censorship. As universities crack down on free speech and the media amplifies extreme voices, students are starting to internalize the message that their opinions are unwelcome, that their voices don't matter, and that it's safer to stay silent than risk the consequences of speaking out. And that, my friends, is a dangerous precedent. Because a society that silences its dissenters is a society that's on the brink of collapse. It's a society that's lost its capacity for critical thinking, for self-reflection, and for progress. Section 7, the long shadow of the 60s. But here's the good news, the spirit of the 60s is alive and well. The students protesting today might not be wearing tie-dye or listening to Jimi Hendrix, but they're cut from the same cloth as their predecessors. They're idealistic, they're passionate, and they're not afraid to fight for what they believe in. And just like the 60s generation, they're already making a difference. They're forcing universities to confront their own complicity in systems of oppression. They're pushing back against the influence of corporate money in politics, and they're sparking a national conversation about social justice and the role of young people in shaping the future. The 1960s protests didn't solve all the world's problems, but they did change the world. They showed that ordinary people, even young people, can make a difference. They proved that dissent is not unpatriotic. It's essential to a functioning democracy. Section 8. Will they listen? The question is, will we listen? Will we heed the calls for justice and equality? Will we support these young activists as they challenge the status quo and demand a better world? Or will we dismiss them as entitled snowflakes, too naive to understand the complexities of the world? The answer, my friends, is up to us. We can choose to be on the right side of history, to stand with these young people as they fight for their future and ours. Or we can choose to be on the wrong side, to cling to the status quo even as it crumbles around us. The choice is clear. The question is, what will you choose? Section 9. The future of the fight. The fight for a more just and equitable world is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be setbacks, there will be disappointments, and there will be times when it feels like we're taking 2 steps back for every step forward. But we can't give up. We can't lose hope. Because the future belongs to those who believe in the power of their own voices. To those who are willing to stand up and fight for what's right, even when it's hard. So, let the protests continue. Let the voices of dissent ring out. Let the world know that we will not be silenced. The future is watching, and they're counting on us.